Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me.
The frozen wasteland stretched endlessly before him, a vast expanse of ice and snow, broken only by jagged mountains that clawed at the sky like the bones of ancient gods. The wind howled, carrying with it the bitter sting of cold that seemed to cut through Alvin's thick fur cloak and settle deep into his bones. He gripped his staff tightly, its soft glow a faint beacon of warmth in the otherwise unforgiving landscape. Alvin had been traveling for weeks, though the days had begun to blur together. The sun rarely showed itself this far north, and the constant twilight made it difficult to track the passage of time. The mission weighed heavily on his men to find the relic, retrieve its power, and save the world from the creeping darkness that threatened to engulf it. Simple enough, at least in theory. But as the young priest trudged through the snow, he couldn't help but feel the crushing weight of doubt. Was he really the one to carry out such a task? The elders at the temple had spoken so highly of his faith, his unwavering connection to the holy light, but out here, in the desolate wilderness, that faith felt like little more than a flickering candle against a raging storm. Still, Alvin pressed on. He had to. The fate of the world depended on it, or so they said. A sudden movement to his left snapped him out of his thoughts. Alvin froze, his grip tightening on the staff. His breath came in shallow bursts as his eyes scanned the horizon, searching for the source of the disturbance. For a moment, all was still, but then he saw Ida's shadow, moving quickly across the snow, too fast to be human. Without thinking, Alvin raised his staff, the glow intensifying as he channeled the holy light. The shadow came closer, and Alvin could make out the creature's form, a skeletal, with long, twisted limbs and a face that seemed to be nothing more than a black void. It moved with terrifying speed, its clawed hands outstretched as it closed the distance between them. By the light, Alvin whispered, panic rising in his chest. The creature lunged, and Alvin barely had time to react. He thrust his staff forward, releasing a burst of holy energy that struck the creature in the chest. It let out an ear-piercing screech as the light tore through it, disintegrating its body into nothing more than ash. Alvin staggered back, his heart pounding in his chest. He had faced shadow creatures before, but never like this. Something about this one had felt a broken bar different, more dangerous, more intelligent. As the remnants of the creature scattered in the wind, Alvin felt a presence behind him. He whirled around, staff at the ready, but what he saw froze him in place. Standing a few feet away was a figure, cloaked in darkness, with wings that seemed to shimmer like blackened glass. The figure's eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, were fixed on him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "You handle yourself well," the figure said, its voice smooth and cold, like ice sliding over stone. Alvin's grip on the staff tightened. "Who are you?" he demanded, though his voice betrayed his fear. The figure stepped forward, the darkness around it parting to reveal more of its form. It was tall, with sharp, angular features, and its wings, now fully visible, were unmistakably those of an angel, though not the kind Alvin had been taught to revere. These wings were black as night, the feathers tinged with a faint, unnatural glow. "I am Kale," the figure said, its smile widening. "Once a guardian of the holy light, now a broken bar, something else." Alvin took a step back, his mind racing. A fallen angel. The temple's scriptures had spoken of such beings as angels who had been cast out of the heavens for defying the will of the light. They were dangerous, deceitful creatures, the very embodiment of corruption. "I don't believe you," Alvin said, though his voice was weaker than he intended. "The holy light would never allow one of its own to fall." Kale chuckled, a sound that sent chills down Alvin's spine. "Believe what you will, priest, but I have no reason to lie. In fact, I may be your only hope if you truly wish to find the relic you seek." Alvin's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about the relic?" Kale's wings shifted, and for a moment, Alvin thought he saw something akin to sadness flicker across the angel's face. "Because I was once its guardian," Kale said, his voice quieter now. "I protected it, upheld its power, until I learned the truth of what it truly was. The truth? Alvin echoed, confused. What are you talking about? Kale took another step closer, and despite himself, Alvin didn't move away. There was something about the fallen angel that was strangely a broken bar compelling, as if Kale's words held a weight that Alvin couldn't ignore. The relic, Kale said, is not what you think it is. It's not a tool for salvation, nor is it meant to purify the world of darkness. It is a weapon, created long ago to wage war on those who oppose the holy light's vision of purity. Its power can cleanse, yes, but it can also destroy. And those who wield it do not always have pure intentions. Alvin shook his head, trying to process what Kale was saying. This went against everything he had been taught. The holy light was pure, untainted. It couldn't be used for destruction, could it? You're lying, Alvin said, though his voice lacked conviction. You're trying to deceive me, to lead me away from my mission. Kale's expression hardened. If I wanted to deceive you, priest, I wouldn't be standing here telling you the truth. The relic is dangerous, more so than you can imagine. And if you don't learn the truth of its origins, you will never be able to control its power. Alvin hesitated. He wanted to dismiss Kale's words as lies, as the manipulations of a fallen angel, but something about them rang true. Could the holy light really have such a dark history? And if so, what did that mean for his mission? What do you want from me? Alvin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kale's gaze softened, and for the first time, Alvin saw a hint of vulnerability in the fallen angel's eyes. I want to help you, Kale said. I was cast out for questioning the relic's use, for defying those who sought to wield it as a weapon. But I can't stop it alone. If you truly wish to find the relic and harness its power, you must understand its true nature. And to do that, you need to know my story. Alvin swallowed, his mind racing. This wasn't what he had expected when he set out on his mission. But if what Kale was saying was true, then his entire journey had been built on a lie. The thought of returning to the temple with the knowledge, of confronting the elders with the truth, filled him with dread. But he had no choice. If there was even a chance that Kale was telling the truth, he had to know. He had to understand. All right, Alvin said, lowering his staff slightly. Tell me your story. Kale nodded, and for a moment, the fallen angel looked almost a broken bar relieved. He turned, motioning for Alvin to follow him, and together they began walking through the snow, the vast expanse of the northern wilderness stretching out before them. As Alvin followed Kale across the frozen wasteland, the air between them was tense but filled with unspoken questions. Each step seemed to bring new doubts to Alvin's mind, but also a strange sense of purpose. The more he listened to Kale, the more he began to wonder if the fallen angel's words held some kernel of truth, however uncomfortable that might be. They walked in silence for hours, the wind whipping around them, the snow crunching beneath their boots. The landscape was barren, as if the world itself had been drained of life. It made Alvin feel small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things, his mission suddenly seeming less like a holy quest and more like a small cog in some greater, unfathomable machine. Eventually, they came to a small cave nestled at the base of a towering mountain. Kale led Alvin inside, the dark, narrow entrance opening up into a wide, hidden chamber. There was a fire already burning at the center, casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. Kale sat down near the flames, his black wings folding behind him, and gestured for Alvin to sit across from him. The fire's warmth was a welcome relief after the biting cold, and for a few moments, neither of them spoke. Alvin's mind was a whirl of thoughts, but he couldn't deny that the heat was coming, even if the presence of a fallen angel was not. Kale's eyes glinted in the firelight as he finally began to speak. You know the holy light as something pure, something untouchable by corruption, yes? Alvin nodded, but he stayed silent, waiting for Kale to continue. Once, I believed that too, Kale said, his voice softer now. I was one of the most devout. I served the light with every fiber of my being. But the relic had broken bar. His voice trailed off, and for a moment, He seemed lost in thought, staring into the flames. "What happened?" Alvin asked quietly, feeling a strange sense of pity for the fallen angel, despite everything he had been taught. Kale's eyes flicked to Alvin's, sharp and bright. "I was the relic's guardian, chosen for my unwavering faith. I was there when the relic was first brought into existence, though its origins are far older than the holy light would have you believe. It was not created by the light, nor was it meant to be wielded by it. It was a broken bar, a gift, of sorts, from an ancient power that existed before the light." Alvin's stomach twisted. "You mean a broken bar? It's a tool of darkness?" Kale shook his head. "No, not darkness. Not in the way you understand it. The relic is neither good nor evil, it is balance. It is the embodiment of both light and shadow, meant to maintain harmony." "But the holy light, a broken bar," he sighed, his wings twitching slightly. "They sought to use it only for the light, to destroy anything they deemed impure. The relic's power was never meant to be wielded in such a way. When I realized what they were doing, I tried to stop them." Alvin swallowed hard, his mind reeling. "And they cast you out for it?" "Yes," Kale said, his voice laced with bitterness. "I was branded a traitor, a fallen angel, because I refused to allow them to pervert the relic's true purpose. The light became something different, something dangerous, and those who followed it blindly, a broken bar, they became its tools." Alvin felt a shiver run down his spine. The idea that the holy light, the very thing he had devoted his life to, it could be corrupted in such a way was almost too much to bear. He had always believed in its purity, its righteousness. But now a broken bar, now he wasn't so sure. "So, what does this mean for me?" Alvin asked, his voice quieter now, laced with uncertainty. "I was sent to retrieve the relic, to bring it back to the temple." "What happens if I do that?" Kale's gaze was steady. "If you return the relic to the temple, they will use it as they always have, yet to destroy anything that doesn't fit their idea of purity. The relic's power will be twisted, turned into a weapon to cleanse the world of all darkness, but in doing so, they will also erase balance. Without darkness, there can be no light. Without shadow, the world will crumble under the weight of the holy light's tyranny." Alvin was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire, the flames dancing and crackling in the quiet. His mind was a storm of confusion, doubt, and fear. He had always believed that his mission was one of salvation, but now it seemed more like a path to ruin. "I don't know if I can go back," Alvin whispered, more to himself than to Kale. Kale's expression softened. "You don't have to decide now. There is still time to find the relic and uncover the truth for yourself. But know this, priest, once you see the relic for what it truly is, you can never go back to the way things were. The holy light is not what you think it is, and neither is the relic." Alvin's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise outside the cave. He turned, his body tensing, his hand instinctively reaching for his staff. Kale's wings shifted, his eyes narrowing as he too heard the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching through the snow. "They've found us," Kale murmured, rising to his feet, his wings spreading slightly in preparation for a fight. Alvin stood as well, his heart racing. "Who?" "The high priest's men," Kale said, his voice grim. "They've been tracking us since we left the temple. They want to make sure you bring the relic back. Or, if you don't, to eliminate you." Alvin's pulse quickened. He wasn't ready for this. He hadn't even fully grasped the truth of Kale's words, let alone figured out what he was supposed to do about it. Kale glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "You still have a choice, priest. But that choice is coming faster than you realize." The footsteps grew louder, closer. Alvin gripped his staff tightly, the holy light flaring to life at its tip. He could feel the power coursing through him, but now, for the first time, he wondered if it was truly his to wield or if he was just another tool of the light's will. The entrance to the cave filled with shadows as figures appeared clad in heavy armor, their faces hidden beneath thick hoods. Alvin could feel the weight of their intent pressing down on him like a suffocating blanket. One of the figures stepped forward, his voice booming in the enclosed space. "Alvin of the Holy Light, you are commanded to return to the temple. The relic must be retrieved and brought back to its rightful place." Alvin's heart pounded in his chest. He had been trained for this moment to obey, to follow orders without question. But now, after everything Kale had told him, could he really do that? "Yeah, broken bar, I don't know if that's the right thing to do," Alvin said, his voice trembling slightly. The figure's hooded face turned toward Kale. "You have been corrupted by the fallen. He has filled your mind with lies. Return to the temple, and we will cleanse you of his influence." Alvin's grip tightened on his staff. He could feel the power of the holy light surging within him, but it no longer felt like a source of comfort. It felt like a cage, trapping him in a belief system he was no longer sure of. Kale stepped forward, his wings flaring out behind him. "He has not been corrupted," the fallen angel said, his voice low and dangerous. "He is beginning to see the truth." "And that's what you fear, isn't it?" The figure drew a sword, its blade glinting in the firelight. "Enough, we will take you both by force if necessary." Alvin's heart raced. This was it. The moment he had to choose whether to follow the Holy Light's orders and return the relic, or to trust Kale and uncover the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. With a deep breath, Alvin stepped forward, his staff glowing brighter as he faced the armored figures. "I won't go back," he said, his voice steadier now. "Not until I know the truth." The figure hesitated for a moment, then lunged forward with the sword raised. But before he could strike, Kale moved like lightning, his wings propelling him forward as he knocked the sword from the man's hand. The cave erupted into chaos. Alvin found himself surrounded by the high priest's men, their weapons gleaming as they closed in on him. He swung his staff, unleashing a burst of holy energy that knocked two of them off their feet. But even as he fought, a part of him hesitated. The holy light's power flowed through him, but it felt wrong now, tainted by doubt. Could he really trust it? The battle was fierce, but Kale's strength was unmatched. His wings cut through the air with deadly precision, and one by one, the attackers fell to the ground. Finally, only one remained of the figure who had spoken. He stumbled back, fear flickering in his eyes as he raised his hands in surrender. Alvin lowered his staff, breathing heavily. He glanced at Kale, who stood over the fallen men, his wings folding back as he watched Alvin with an unreadable expression. The figure's voice shook as he spoke. "You're making a mistake, Alvin. The holy light is the only way. Without it, the world will fall into darkness." Alvin stared at him, the words ringing hollow in his ears. Maybe the world needed more than just the holy light. Maybe it needed balance. Without another word, Alvin turned and walked out of the cave, Kale following silently behind him.